My stepson told me I had no claim to the family business 11 days after we buried his father. He said it in the conference room where I had spent 22 years helping build that company. The long walnut table was covered with financial reports, supplier contracts, and photographs from the early days. In one picture, my husband, Martin, stood beside our first delivery truck. I was standing next to him, holding the company's handwritten ledger against my chest. My stepson, Blake, pushed the photograph aside and placed a termination letter in front of me. "This business belongs to the Carson family," he said. "You were Dad's wife. That doesn't make you an owner." I looked at the signature line beneath the words "voluntary resignation." "You want me to resign? It will make the transition cleaner." "Cleaner for whom?" Blake leaned back. "For everyone." His wife, Tessa, sat beside him with a legal pad on her lap. She had never worked for the company, but she was already taking notes as if the meeting belonged to her. Blake continued, "You'll receive what Dad left you personally. The house, his retirement account, whatever is in the will, but Carson Architectural Millwork stays with me. I had handled payroll during the company's first profitable year. I had negotiated our largest hospital contract. I had used my inheritance from my mother to prevent the business from closing during the recession." But Blake spoke as though I had spent 2 decades decorating the reception area. I placed both hands on the table. "Have you reviewed the partnership agreement?" His expression did not change. "There is no partnership. Dad founded the company." That was not my question. Tessa looked at him. Blake gave a short laugh. "I know how the business is structured." "No," I said, "you know how you assumed it was structured." He slid the resignation letter closer. "Elaine, you're grieving. I don't want this to become ugly." Neither did I. That was why I did not argue. I folded the resignation letter, placed it inside my handbag, and stood. Blake mistook my silence for defeat. What he did not know was that his father and I had signed a partnership agreement 18 years earlier. It gave me 40% of the company. It gave me approval rights over major debt, ownership transfers, and executive appointments. And it contained one clause Blake had never read. A clause that would become active the moment he tried to remove me. My name is Elaine Carson. I was 64 years old when my husband died. Martin and I had been married for 25 years. He had one child from his first marriage. Blake was 13 when Martin introduced us. He was polite but distant. His mother had died in a car accident 3 years earlier, and he had no interest in seeing another woman occupy any part of her place. I understood that. I never asked him to call me Mom. I never forced affection. I cooked dinner, drove him to school when Martin was working late, and attended his soccer games without sitting too close to the front. Over time, we developed a relationship. Not mother and son. Something quieter. Something built from shared routines and cautious trust. When Blake graduated from high school, I helped him revise his college essays. When he broke his wrist, I sat with him at the emergency room because Martin was meeting a client 3 hours away. When he married Tessa, I helped organize the reception after her parents refused to contribute. Blake thanked me for those things. But gratitude is not always the same as acceptance. Part of him continued to believe that everything connected to Martin belonged more naturally to him. That belief became dangerous when the business succeeded. Martin started Carson Architectural Millwork 6 years before we met. The company built custom doors, paneling, cabinetry, and interior woodwork for hotels, offices, hospitals, and historic buildings. When I entered his life, the company had 9 employees and more debt than cash. Martin was gifted with wood. He could study a room and understand proportion instinctively. He could look at a damaged staircase and know how it had been assembled before removing a single board. But he hated paperwork. Invoices remained in his truck. Contracts were signed without being filed. Suppliers called because checks had been written but never mailed. I had worked for 12 years in commercial insurance. I understood records, liability, schedules, and contracts. At first, I helped only in the evenings. Then one of Martin's largest clients delayed payment. The company could not cover payroll. I reviewed every account and discovered that 3 customers had not been billed correctly. Within 2 weeks, I collected enough money to pay the employees. Martin asked me to join the company full-time. I hesitated. Working with a spouse can either strengthen a marriage or expose every weakness inside it. But I believed in him. I also believed the company could become something larger if its creativity was supported by discipline. So I left my job. For the first several years, Martin managed production and design. I managed finance, contracts, insurance, and operations. We worked 10-hour days, sometimes 12. I learned the language of wood species, finishing systems, moisture content, and architectural plans. Martin learned to read cash flow reports. We argued. We apologized. We grew. Blake worked summers in the shop during college. He was good with employees and comfortable with clients. He did not have Martin's craftsmanship, but he had ambition. After earning a business degree, he joined the company full-time. Martin was thrilled. He imagined the 3 of us running it together. That was when the partnership agreement was created. Martin's attorney recommended restructuring the company. Until then, Martin had owned the business individually. The new agreement created Carson Millwork Holdings. Martin received 50%. I received 40%. Blake received 10%. Blake knew he owned 10%. What he never understood was how much I owned or why. The agreement reflected more than marriage. By then, I had invested $180,000 into the company from money my mother left me. I had personally guaranteed a line of credit. I had built the financial systems that allowed the business to qualify for larger contracts. Martin insisted that the ownership reflect reality. Blake was 25 at the time. He barely read the agreement. I watched him flip to the signature page. "Do you want to review the voting provisions?" the attorney asked. Blake smiled. "Dad and I are aligned." Martin looked at him. "You should still read what you sign." "I trust you." That sentence sounded respectful. In truth, it was careless. Blake believed the company would eventually become his. He saw his 10% as a temporary number. He assumed Martin's 50% would pass directly to him. He never asked what would happen to my 40%. He acted as though it would disappear when his father did. For many years, that assumption did not matter. We worked well together. Blake became vice president of sales. He brought in hotel projects and expanded our relationships with developers. I approved budgets and contracts. Martin supervised design and production. The company grew from 9 employees to 73. We moved into a larger facility. We opened a finishing division. We won awards. Blake often introduced Martin as the founder and himself as the future. He introduced me as the person who handled the books. That description annoyed me, but I tolerated it. I did handle the books. I also handled the bank, insurance, legal compliance, purchasing controls, risk management, and every contract over $50,000. Still, I told myself titles did not matter. Results did. Then Martin became ill. At first, it appeared to be exhaustion. He lost weight. He struggled to climb the stairs to our office. The diagnosis was pancreatic cancer. The doctor was honest. Treatment might give us time. It would not give us a cure. Martin continued working for as long as he could. Blake became more involved in daily decisions. That was necessary. It also revealed a side of him I had not fully seen. He wanted faster expansion. He wanted to purchase a competing millwork company in another state. He wanted to borrow $4 million to finance the acquisition. Martin refused. "The company is stable," Blake said. "This is the right time to grow." "It is the right time to protect what we have," Martin answered. "You're thinking like a sick man." The room became silent. Blake regretted the words immediately. But Martin did not forget them. Neither did I. 2 weeks later, Martin asked our attorney, David Rosen, to review the partnership agreement. The three of us met at our house. Blake was not invited. Martin wanted to make sure his ownership interest would not create a fight after his death. The agreement already contained a transfer-on-death provision. His 50% would not automatically pass through his will as ordinary property. Instead, 25% would transfer to Blake. 25% would transfer to me. After Martin's death, I would own 65%. Blake would own 35%. I stared at the numbers. That will destroy him, I said. Martin's face was thin from treatment. He will believe I chose you over him. You are not choosing me. He will see it that way. Then change it. Martin shook his head. I watched him prepare a $4 million loan package while I was receiving chemotherapy. He believes the acquisition will protect the company. He believes size will protect him from feeling replaceable. I said nothing. Martin understood his son better than Blake realized. The agreement also contained a protective clause. If any partner attempted to remove another partner from management, transfer company assets without approval, or misrepresent ownership authority, the affected partner could trigger a mandatory independent valuation and buy-sell process. The person initiating the unauthorized action would temporarily lose voting authority over that matter. It was designed to prevent one partner from using position or grief to seize control. Martin asked David to confirm that the clause remained enforceable. It did. Then he wrote a letter for Blake. He sealed it and gave it to David. What does it say? I asked. The truth. Which truth? That this company was never built by one Carson. Martin died 4 months later. He spent his final week at home. Blake visited daily. There were no business arguments. He sat beside his father, played old jazz records, and helped him drink water. Whatever happened afterward, I do not doubt that Blake loved him. Grief and entitlement can exist in the same person. One does not erase the other. The funeral was held on a Monday. Employees lined the back rows of the church. Several wore jackets embroidered with the company logo. Blake delivered the eulogy. He spoke beautifully about Martin's craftsmanship, standards, and loyalty. He said he would continue his father's legacy. People applauded softly when he finished. I did not realize that, while he was promising to continue the legacy, he had already begun planning to remove me from it. The first sign came the following morning. My company email password no longer worked. I called the IT manager. He sounded uncomfortable. Blake asked us to suspend executive accounts during the transition. Whose accounts? Yours and Martin S. Martin is dead, I am not. There was silence. I'm sorry, Elaine, I thought you knew. I drove to the office. My access card still worked, but the receptionist looked surprised to see me. Inside my office, several file drawers were open. A cardboard box sat on the floor. Blake entered behind me. You shouldn't be here yet, he said. I work here. You need time to grieve. You disabled my email. It was a security precaution. You opened my files. We're consolidating records. Under whose authority? His expression hardened. Mine. That was when he scheduled the conference room meeting. He brought Tessa. He presented the resignation letter. He said the company belonged to the Carson family. He told me being Martin's wife did not make me an owner. And he asked whether I had reviewed the partnership agreement. No. I asked him. He had not. After leaving the building, I drove directly to David Rosen's office. He already knew something was wrong. The IT manager had called him after seeing my account suspension. David placed a copy of the partnership agreement on the table. Did you sign the resignation? No. Good. Blake believes the company belongs to him. He may believe it, the records do not. David walked me through the ownership structure again. Before Martin's death, I held 40%. Martin held 50%. Blake held 10%. Under the agreement, Martin's interest transferred 25% to each of us. I now held 65%. Blake held 35%. The transfer became effective upon Martin's death, subject to routine documentation. Blake was not majority owner. He was not authorized to remove me. He was not even authorized to disable my company access without approval. David then asked whether Blake had signed any major contracts since Martin died. I don't know. We need to find out. The company controller, Susan Webb, was someone I had hired 15 years earlier. I called her from David's office. At first, she hesitated. Then she told me Blake had ordered the preparation of several documents. One named him Chief Executive Officer. Another authorized discussions with a private equity firm. A third granted Tessa a paid advisory position. No board meeting had occurred. No ownership vote had been taken. Blake was behaving as though his father's death had automatically placed him in complete control. David sent formal notice that afternoon. It confirmed the ownership transfer. It demanded restoration of my system access. It suspended any unauthorized executive appointments or ownership negotiations. And it invoked the protective clause in the partnership agreement. The following morning, my email account was restored. Blake called before 8. What did you do? I enforced the agreement. What agreement? The one you signed. His voice became cold. You are using legal technicalities to take my father's company. I owned 40% before your father died. That was because you were married to him. No, it was because I invested money, guaranteed debt, and worked here for 2 decades. He would never leave you control over me. He did not leave me control over you. He transferred his interest according to the partnership agreement. That is not what the will says. The business interest does not pass through the will in the way you assumed. He became quiet. Then he said, I want to see every document. David will send them to your attorney. I don't need an attorney. You brought me a resignation letter. You need one now. He hung up. 3 days later, we met again in the same conference room. This time, David sat beside me. Blake brought an attorney named Michelle Park. Tessa was not present. The walnut table was clear except for 4 binders. Michelle began by asking for the ownership records. David provided the original agreement, amendments, capital contribution schedules, voting records, and transfer provisions. Blake read the ownership page. His face changed. This says Elaine had 40%. Yes, Michelle said. Dad never told me that. You signed this document. I thought it was a profit-sharing arrangement. It is titled Partnership and Ownership Agreement. Blake looked at me. You let me believe you were an employee. I never said that. You knew what I believed. I also watched an attorney ask you to read before signing. He looked away. Michelle continued reviewing the agreement. She found the transfer on death provision. 25% to Blake. 25% to me. The final ownership numbers were clear. 65. 35. Blake leaned toward his attorney. Can we challenge this? On what basis? Dad was sick. The agreement was signed 18 years ago, David said. The transfer provision was reaffirmed twice, most recently 3 years before his diagnosis. Blake flipped through the binder. This cannot be right. David placed another document on the table. It was the list of capital contributions. Martin had invested the original equipment and business assets. I had contributed $180,000 in cash over several years. I had also guaranteed the company's line of credit during the recession. Blake's initial 10% had been partly gifted and partly earned through employment milestones. Michelle read the figures. Then she asked Blake whether he had attempted to terminate me. He looked uncomfortable. I offered her a transition package. You presented a resignation. It was voluntary. You disabled her account before presenting it. Blake said nothing. Michelle found the protective clause. Her expression became serious. This provision has been triggered. What does that mean? Blake asked. It means your attempt to remove a partner without proper authority activates an independent valuation and governance review. I don't want a valuation. The affected partner may require it. He looked at me. You're forcing me out. No. Then why trigger a buy-sell clause? Because I need to know what else you attempted while assuming I had no rights. David placed copies of the private equity correspondence on the table. Blake had contacted a firm called Northbridge Capital. He proposed selling a 49% interest in Carson Architectural Millwork. The presentation identified him as sole controlling owner. It described me as the founder's widow who would exit after estate administration. Northbridge had signed a preliminary confidentiality agreement. The transaction had not advanced far, but Blake had already misrepresented the ownership structure. His face reddened. I was exploring options. You offered part of my company, I said. It would have brought capital. You had no authority. I was going to discuss it with you. When, after they established a price. He struck the table with his palm. You don't understand what it takes to keep this company competitive. I kept my voice level. I reviewed our debt this morning. I reviewed our backlog, profit margins, insurance exposure, and cash reserves. Which part do you believe I do not understand? You've always been afraid of growth. I am afraid of selling control to solve a problem you have not proved exists. He looked at Michelle. This is exactly why Dad wanted me to lead. David reached for a sealed envelope. Martin anticipated that statement. Blake froze. The envelope had his name written across the front. David explained that Martin had instructed him to deliver it only if a dispute arose over ownership or control. Blake did not reach for it. Read it, he said. David opened the envelope. Blake, if you are hearing this because you and Elaine disagree about the company, then I am sorry I was not clear enough while I was alive. You are my son. I love you. I am proud of the work you have done here. But Carson Architectural Millwork is not your inheritance in the ordinary sense. It is a business built through shared risk. Elaine did not stand beside me while I built it. She built it with me. She invested her money when the company could not borrow. She kept 73 families paid when I was too sick to leave the shop. She negotiated contracts that changed the company's future. You inherited part of my ownership because you earned a place here. She received part because it was already hers in every way that mattered. I have watched you begin to confuse leadership with possession. A leader protects what others helped build. An owner reads the agreement before claiming authority. If you try to remove Elaine, sell the company, or borrow against it without understanding her rights, you will prove that the protections in our agreement were necessary. Do not make grief your excuse for taking control. Do not make blood your argument against work. The company carries our family name. That does not mean only one member of the family created its value. Read the agreement. Then decide whether you want to lead beside Elaine or fight her for something neither of you built alone. Dad. When David finished, Blake stared at the table. No one spoke. The letter did not make him apologize. Not immediately. Instead, he became angry. He wrote this because you turned him against me. I felt something inside me harden. Your father asked you to read an agreement 18 years ago. I did not stop you. You always wanted control. I wanted accurate records. You wanted to make yourself permanent. I was already permanent, you simply did not notice. Blake stood. Michelle touched his arm. Sit down. He did. She spoke quietly. The ownership is clear. The attempted executive removal was unauthorized. The private equity outreach created additional problems. We need to discuss solutions. Blake looked at me. What do you want? It was the first useful question he had asked. I want the company protected. From me. From anyone who believes confidence is a substitute for authority. His face tightened. What does that mean in practice? I had considered the answer carefully. I did not want to remove Blake from the business. He was talented. He knew clients, sales, and industry trends. Employees respected him, even if some feared his impatience. I wanted governance strong enough to prevent either of us from acting alone. I proposed 5 conditions. First, the company would appoint an independent board member with manufacturing and finance experience. Second, any debt above $500,000 would require board and ownership approval. Third, no sale of equity could occur without both partners' written consent. Fourth, executive compensation and family-related employment would be reviewed annually. Fifth, Blake would remain president of sales and business development, but he would not become chief executive officer immediately. We would appoint an interim chief operating officer while the company completed a strategic review. Blake laughed bitterly. So I'm being demoted. You appointed yourself chief executive without a vote. You are returning to the position you legally held. And you. I remain chief financial and administrative officer. You control 65%. Yes. Then all of this is theater. You can do whatever you want. No, I am offering governance restrictions that also limit me. He studied the proposal. If I refuse, the protective clause allows an independent valuation. Either of us may offer to buy the other's interest under the agreement's terms. Blake's face changed. He had never considered that possibility. Are you offering to buy me out? Not today. Could you? Yes. The company's insurance proceeds, cash reserves, and financing capacity made a structured buyout possible. It would not be easy. But it was real. For the first time since Martin died, Blake understood that I was not asking him to acknowledge symbolic importance. I possessed actual ownership rights. He requested a week. During that week, he spoke with senior employees. He reviewed years of records. He learned which contracts I had negotiated. He learned how much capital I had contributed. He learned that the company survived the recession because I mortgaged property inherited from my mother and placed the funds into the business. He also learned that Martin's final medical leave had not weakened the company because I quietly assumed operational duties Blake believed were being handled by his father. The facts embarrassed him. They also educated him. At the end of the week, Blake accepted 4 of the 5 conditions. He objected to delaying the CEO appointment. We compromised. He would become chief executive after 12 months if the independent board member confirmed that he had met agreed financial, operational, and governance standards. Blake signed the resolution. So did I. The immediate crisis ended. The emotional one did not. For months, we spoke only about business. Every conversation was controlled. Every decision was documented. Employees sensed the tension. Some assumed I would eventually sell my share to Blake. Others believed I would force him out. Neither happened. We hired an independent board member named Samuel Ortiz. Samuel had spent 30 years running a specialty manufacturing company. He was direct and unimpressed by family drama. At his first meeting, he asked Blake to explain the Northbridge proposal. Blake described expansion opportunities. Samuel listened. Then he asked, "What problem were you solving?" Blake spoke about market share. Samuel repeated the question. "What problem were you solving?" Blake had no clear answer. The company was profitable. Debt was manageable. The backlog was strong. The private equity deal had not been designed to save the business. It had been designed to make Blake feel like the leader of a larger one. Samuel asked me why I opposed every major acquisition. I do not oppose every acquisition, I said. I oppose borrowing before integration plans exist. He reviewed my records. Then he told me I had become too cautious after Martin's illness. That annoyed me. It was also true. The strategic review forced both of us to confront our weaknesses. Blake wanted growth because standing still felt like failure. I wanted stability because change felt like another loss. Neither instinct should control a company alone. Over the next year, we tested a smaller expansion. We purchased equipment from a retiring competitor without buying the entire company. We hired 12 experienced workers. We opened a regional sales office without taking on major new debt. Revenue grew. Margins remained healthy. Blake met the performance standards. At the annual meeting, I voted in favor of appointing him Chief Executive Officer. He looked genuinely surprised. You voted yes. You earned it. He looked down at the signed resolution. I thought you would keep moving the standard. That would make the agreement meaningless. For the first time, he smiled at me without suspicion. Our personal relationship took longer. Martin's birthday arrived 14 months after his death. Blake came to the house alone. He carried the old photograph from the conference room, the one showing Martin beside the first delivery truck and me holding the ledger. He had placed it in a new frame. I found the original date on the back, he said. I looked at the photograph. October 1999. You remember. That was the week we nearly missed payroll. Blake sat across from me. I reviewed the old bank records. Why? Samuel told me I couldn't lead a company if I didn't understand what nearly killed it. That sounds like him. I saw the deposit you made. I said nothing. $110,000, Blake continued, from your mother's estate. That was the first contribution. There were others. Yes. He looked ashamed. I spent years believing Dad allowed you to own part of the business because you were his wife. I know. I never asked why. No. I thought the company was something he built and you helped organize. That is also something I know. He studied the photograph. When I disabled your email, did you think I was trying to steal the company? I thought you believed there was nothing to steal from me. He closed his eyes. That may be worse. It hurt more. He nodded. I am sorry. I waited. He continued. I am sorry I told you that you had no claim. I am sorry I tried to remove you before reading the agreement. And I am sorry I used Dad's death to move faster than anyone could question me. That was the apology I needed. Not because it erased what happened. Because it named it accurately. I accept your apology, I said. Do you forgive me? I do. Do you trust me? More than I did last year. He gave a small laugh. That is fair. Then he asked whether I planned to remain with the company forever. No. He looked surprised. I will retire when I decide the company can function without me, and when I have something I want to retire toward. What do you want? I don't know yet. That was the truth. For 22 years, the company had shaped my days. Martin's death had made me wonder who I was without him. Blake's attempt to remove me had forced me to defend a role I eventually needed to release voluntarily. There is a difference between being pushed out and choosing to leave. I remained for 3 more years. During that time, Blake became a stronger executive. He learned to read every agreement. He stopped treating questions as disloyalty. He developed managers instead of making every decision himself. I trained a new chief financial officer named Priya Shah. She was smarter than both of us in several areas and unafraid to say so. When I announced my retirement, Blake asked whether I wanted the company to buy my interest. We negotiated. I sold 25% back to the company over 5 years. I retained 40% as a non-operating owner and board member. Blake increased his ownership gradually through performance-based purchases. No one received everything automatically. Ownership followed agreements, valuations, and decisions. Exactly as Martin intended. The company still carries the Carson name. Blake leads it. Priya protects the financial discipline. Samuel remains on the board. I attend quarterly meetings and ask fewer questions than I once did, but better ones. Tessa never received the advisory position Blake had planned for her. She later admitted she had encouraged him to move quickly because she believed widows often sold their interests cheaply. I did not forget that. I also did not build my future around resenting it. Blake and Tessa remain married. Our relationship is polite. Boundaries have made it easier. The original partnership agreement is stored in the company's legal archive. A scanned copy appears in the governance system. Every new executive must review it. Blake created that rule himself. On the wall outside the conference room, there is now a series of photographs showing the company's history. Martin in the first shop. The original 9 employees. The first hospital project. The expansion facility. One photograph shows me standing beside a stack of contract binders during the recession. The caption reads, Elaine Carson, co-owner and operating partner. Blake chose the wording. I did not ask him to. My stepson once told me I had no claim to the family business. He believed blood made him the natural owner. He believed marriage made my position temporary. He believed the work he could see mattered more than the work performed behind office doors, inside contracts, and across years of financial risk. Then he read the partnership agreement. The agreement did not create my contribution. It recorded it. That distinction matters. Documents do not invent reality when they are prepared honestly. They preserve reality after memory becomes convenient. Martin knew that after his death, grief would distort what people believed they deserved. So he made the ownership clear. He placed our rights in writing. He created consequences for anyone who tried to move faster than the agreement allowed. And he left his son a letter that did not choose between us. It told the truth about both of us. Blake was capable of leading. He was not entitled to lead without accountability. I was essential to the company. I was not entitled to oppose every change out of fear. The partnership agreement forced us to meet as owners instead of fighting as widow and son. That saved the business. Eventually, it saved part of our family too. People sometimes assume quiet justice means revealing a secret document that destroys the person who underestimated you. That was not what happened. The agreement did not destroy Blake. It stopped him long enough to learn. It did not give me revenge. It gave me standing. It did not freeze the company in Martin's memory. It gave us rules strong enough to continue without him. My stepson said I had no claim. He was wrong. But the most satisfying part was not watching him discover my percentage. It was watching him become the kind of leader who finally understood why that percentage existed. Blood can make someone family. It does not automatically make them an owner. Marriage can create partnership. But ownership should still reflect contribution, risk, agreement, and truth. Blake inherited his father's ambition. I protected his father's discipline. The company needed both. And the partnership agreement made sure neither of us could erase the other.